Hey everyone, Curse Deck Builder here, making our way to 10,000 decks assisted, and here we are with Oloro Ageless Aesthetic, and I'm gonna say +1/+1 counters. That's the direction we're gonna go in. This deck comes to us from Deathcore, who says absolutely nothing. They just said your choice. They were looking for a general kind of view of this deck, and we will definitely be doing a general look. There's a lot I have to say about the deck, and I'm going to be sending it into a general direction, and then we're going to see the results of that, hopefully with another draft. If you'd like to take a look at the deck list we're talking about today, or if you'd like to submit your own deck list to me so that I can make a video assisting your deck, please check the video description down below. Alright, so who is Oloro Ageless Aesthetic? And why are they our life gain +1/+1 counter commander? So Oloro is a really interesting commander. This is a, my goodness, Eminence is the word commander before Eminence had its own little keyword. Oloro is 6 mana in Esper, that's white, blue, black, giant soldier, 4/5, and they say at the beginning of your upkeep you gain 2 life. Whenever you gain life, you may pay 1. If you do, draw a card and each opponent loses 1 life. But the main reason, the big fun part of Oloro is at the beginning of your upkeep, if Oloro Ageless Aesthetic is in the command zone, you gain 2 life. So much like Edgar Markov and the other commanders, Oloro does something from the command zone. So theoretically, you never quite need to cast Oloro to get that advantage from him. This can be particularly frustrating to your opponents, but I mean, they're playing a game with you. What did they expect? Oloro is just really hard to deal with and usually has a bunch of different types of decks that he can belong in, whether it be life gain trigger or let's say Pillow Fort. This deck, according to the tags that we find on top of it, seems to be trying to do a lot of things at once. I'm going to try to guide this deck to the +1/+1 counter side of it because 1, I mean, I like aggressive decks, but 2, I think that's a really interesting direction to take Oloro, and 3, I think it's going to be the most successful thing. So before we actually go to the deck, there's actually one more thing I want to talk about Oloro, and I want to talk about life gain. This is something I talk about quite often when we see life gain decks, and it is the concept and the goals of life gain. So when we look at life gain in all formats, we have to remember something. There is rarely a life total that will keep you safe from your opponents, and that life total is much higher than you expect it to be. So for example, gaining 20, 40, 60, 100 life isn't that meaningful because your opponents, especially if they start working together, will knock you down to 0 incredibly fast. The only successful way I've ever felt this is in my my Eiley deck, which you can find on this channel. And Eiley would gain literally near infinite amounts of health, any number I chose, which I would usually put into the billions, which would usually result in me just picking up the dice from the table and putting them somewhere else. At that point, your opponents can only defeat you out of commander damage or infect or another win condition, mill, things like that. So with that in mind, that was the kind of number that you needed to hit for you to stop caring about damage. That being said though, this deck can't get to that number, and most decks can't. So when we talk about life gain, we're not talking about the amount of life gained, we're talking about the triggers that life gain activates, let's say. So what's nice about Oloro is it's a small amount of life, it's 2, it's every upkeep for the entire game. Every one of your upkeeps, I should say. So it's really easy to get life gain triggers, and you're gonna get them very regularly. So generally for me, this is the kind of thing I would like to push the deck towards, and +1/+1 counters are a really nice place to be getting those triggers. Now, the deck itself. At a glance, this deck seems to be struggling to figure out what it wants to be. At the slightest thing I look, we've got 32 lands, that's heartbreaking, and no basics. That tells me that this deck is very much so a proof of concept or very early in drafts. We've got 26 sideboard cards that are deck builder is looking at. This is early in the deck, so it doesn't really have, so I'm not going to be too hard on it, the fact that it doesn't have any directions, but I am going to be a little hard on it because I think it's trying to do a lot of things at the same time, and it doesn't seem to quite know either what it wants to do or the power level it wants to be. We're playing a deck that has access to, that's playing Demonic Tutor and Mana Drain, but also wants to be playing 6 mana Dovin. So not quite sure what's going on here, but I'll try to point out the cards that don't work in the strategy of +1/+1 counters, and the rest we'll see from there. So the first and easiest things is, we got 32 lands, that's too few. And if we look at our curve goes for a very long time with Enter the Infinite and Omniscience, a bunch of 7 mana, a bunch of 6 mana, a bunch of 5 mana, a bunch of 4 mana. We need to add to the land count. We'll also note that we're playing very, very few mana rocks. This deck is heading for disaster incredibly quickly. First thing, easy enough. Let's get up to 38 lands, add 6 basics. That's not too bad. And then let's add the regular mana rocks. I'm not going to link them. I'm not going to put them on screen, but we're talking about the signets. We're talking about the talismans. If you want to cast big cards, that's what you're going to do. Soul Ring for sure, Arcane Signet, the standard kind of stuff. After that, let's start looking at these cards, and what we're going to do is we're going to go backwards. We're going to end on creatures and planeswalkers last, and we're going to go and see what in this deck is working with life gain, what is working with +1/+1 counters, and what is generically strong that we can keep. Looking through our enchantments, we have a mix of cards that I like and a mix of cards I don't like. So the cards that I do like, obviously we have the strength of Rhystic Study, we've got Smothering Tide, we've got Cathar's Crusade with +1/+1 counters. These are all very good and I do like them. Inexorable Tide also works really well with Proliferate, all good. The prison cards, I don't know if we need to play both of them, especially if we're in a +1/+1 counter deck. I think we're in a pretty good defensive setup, especially with the life gain that we're getting, that I don't think we necessarily need to play them. They're not getting us further in the game. I think we can toss them. Leyline of Anticipation, likewise, really doesn't belong here. Anticipation either belongs in decks that really care about instant speed, or what I would consider to be kind of like mid-range decks that care about just general card advantage. And this is a deck where we've got 17 instant spells and a bunch of other cards that we don't really care to flash in most of the time. So it's not particularly strong. Where are we? It's not particularly strong. And at 4 mana, if it's not in your opening hand, you really don't want to be casting this. So I think this is easy to cut as well. Moving on, Exquisite Blood really doesn't work without its other card, Sanguine Bond. I see it here in the sideboard. If you're playing one, you got to play both. And if that's going to be your win condition, I think that's fine. It's not a problem. But as it is right now, you really want to be playing both. Looking at True Conviction, I think this is fine if our goal is to be winning with our creatures and +1/+1 counters, then I'm absolutely down for it. However, I just talked about having things like Sanguine Bond and Exquisite Blood. You got to cut one or the other. You can't have both. At this point, we're too high into high mana cards, and we want to lean towards the creature build, I think. With 23 creatures, we could be using more, and I will be suggesting a ton more. But with that in mind, True Conviction in this build is not good, but I would like to make it good, so I'm going to tell you to keep it. Finally, we have Omniscience. This deck cannot cast Omniscience, not with 32 lands. That's a third of your lands need to be out on the battlefield. Your opponents have to not interact with you. You have to draw this card. This is too much to happen. Also, you're just not a deck that really is going to go off this way. You can cast a bunch of really strong cards, but then you're just going to run out of things to do, and with that in mind, I don't think this is where it belongs. It's a great card. You really want to cheat it into play, and you cannot. Looking at our artifacts, Everflowing Chalice is just really, really nice with Proliferate, so I do like its inclusion here. Chromatic Lantern, I don't think we need that here. I don't think color is our problem from what I'm seeing. It's mainly amount, 45, 37, 18. Considering we're... Oh, sorry, I was looking at the wrong. Production, 63, 63, 63. Seems like we have very, cycles were added then, with the numbers being all the same. So with that in mind, I don't think we need Chromatic Lantern, but if you feel like you like it, that's fine. Coalition Relic, I really don't like Coalition Relic. I'd rather this be Arcane Signet or any 2-mana card. I do appreciate that it taps for 2 every second turn. I still don't like it. I'll leave that up to you to decide. Let's see. Sword of Truth and Justice, once again, very nice with +1/+1 counters, but at the creature count we have, I'm not too impressed. Once again, I'm going to tell you to keep it because we're going to add some creatures to this deck. So with that in mind, keep it, but if you weren't to add more creatures, I would say cut it for sure. Aether Flux Reservoir, always good in these kind of decks. Very, very happy. Alhamaret's Archive. Very, very nice. I think that's fine. It doesn't increase the number of triggers, but it belongs in a deck like this, so I'm not going to complain too much. So I'll just say keep this in. You're pretty safe. And then Bowls of Citadel, obviously very, very good in a deck like this where you want to be paying the life you've gained into more spells. So big fan of that. So artifacts, not too bad. Now we get into instants, and I'm having a bit of a hard time here. So we have a lot of interaction, and I feel like we're a little too heavy into interaction. If we're going to be an aggressive deck that attacks our opponents, we can't be holding up this much mana, especially with this few lands. So things like Condescend, I'm already ready to kick out. Dawn Charm, kick that out as well. Mana Leak, also I don't particularly see that here. Then we're going to 3 mana. Absorb is just cute. You have enough life gain. You don't need to make your counter spells more expensive just to get 3 life. I don't think you particularly need that. Dromar's Charm is just okay. Once again, it's almost worse than Absorb because it doesn't put these two together. And I just said Absorb is bad, so you can cut this pretty easily. Eerie Interlude, and I believe Ghostway is right after. Yeah. Eerie Interlude and Ghostway, once again, they're great if we have more creatures. But even then, so both of these exile our creatures, therefore getting rid of all their +1/+1 counters, I would rather just some form of indestructibility or counter magic. You have access to counter magic. I don't think you need to play these. Mana Short. I've never seen this card before. It's like 3 mana to skip a player's turn. Like, this is really neat. Like, I'm fine with this. I think this is a ridiculous card. I love it. I just don't see it being very good here. Unless you know which opponent you're targeting, or you can keep putting this back into your hand. I'm not too sold on it. Interesting. This is a very interesting card. I don't think this is the deck for this, but if you kept playing it, I wouldn't be too mad because I think, yeah, I think this is an interesting card. All right. Obscura Charm. Once again, this feels a little, this would just be Generous Gift or Stroke of Midnight. We should also be playing things like Swords to Plowshares, A Path to Exile. But I'm not going to go into too many of those cards because I want to build the base of this deck, and I feel like this deck is kind of missing the base of it. This is too complicated of a card. It's doing too many weird things. I don't think it's the kind of card you want. Teferi's Protection, unlike the other protection spells, I really like. Easy addition, love that. Akroma's Will, once again, if we buff up the creatures, this is a very, very strong card. However, the whole clause of Akroma's Will doesn't really work with our commander. The main strength of our commander is that he never needs to be on the outside of the command zone. So by using Akroma's Will that makes us cast our commander, I'm not too impressed by it. So for me, I think this is a cut. It does make me think of there are other cards that we could play like this, but at the moment, I think True Conviction just does the job better. So we really, really do not need Akroma's Will here. Semester's End. Once again, though this gives +1/+1 counters, it does exile all of our creatures, which removes the counters that they already have. This at least lets us choose the number of creatures we exile, so we can keep some and blink others. But even then, at 4 mana, I just don't really see this. I don't know what we're trying to do with this. I think this is easy to toss. Nexus of Fate, Once again, this is 7 mana. This is a lot of mana. I don't see us casting this with the mana that we have. And even then, I don't really see this as being the card we want to cast. True Conviction is a lot better. And if you think of True Conviction being kind of like a additional attack because all of your creatures hit twice, I know it's not exactly like that, but like conceptualize with me. That's 6 mana and happens every turn, whereas Nexus of Fate happens once and then gets shuffled back into your deck. Don't get me wrong, with tutors, you can keep putting it back into your hand and keep taking extra turns, but that's a very, very complicated win condition and is still 100% dependent on the creatures you have on the field, so I don't like this. Coming to our sorceries, Profane Tutor, fine, I don't mind it, I think it's great. Contentious Plan, the whiplash between these next two cards, Demonic Tutor and Contentious Plan, when it comes to power level, is a lot for me, but Contentious Plan works with the theme, perfectly fine with it, I think it's fine. Demonic Tutor, it's good, I'm not going to complain. I think this is a deck that's struggling to figure out what it wants to tutor, but when it's good, it's going to be very, very good. Clear the Mind, no idea why this is here. This is a very, very specific card. Do you have a friend who plays mill and you hate them? If so, you're probably going to mill this card over and not get to use it. Don't play cards like this. I don't think they're very, very bad. It's 3 mana to draw a card. It is, I guess, Graveyard Hate, but you could just play Bojuka Bog. You're in the colors, so don't play this. After that, we have Enter the Infinite, and this is just the exact same thing I've been saying before. Like, don't get me wrong, I know the combo between Enter the Infinite and Omniscience. You're not going to be able to cast this card, ever. It's 12 mana. It's 12 mana. It's just not going to happen. And your opponents, if you get to the point to cast this and your opponents haven't interfered with you, something is profoundly wrong, and you need to sit down and explain to your opponents how to beat you or beat anyone. So I don't see this really happening, so to me, this is a very easy cut as well. Finally, we're coming to the creatures, and the creatures here have like two kind of themes. They are either strong cards, so like Esper Sentinel, Drannith Magistrate, Grand Abolisher, none of which of these cards I'm ever going to complain about. They're all very, very powerful cards. And then we have cards that are on theme, like Grateful Apparition, which I really, really do like, or Suture Priest that gains this life. And then we're going to have a few cards here like Archetype of Courage. And I'm not quite sure what this theming is here. It's giving our creatures a bunch of abilities, and our creatures don't need abilities, they need to grow. So all of our archetypes, we have Archetype of Imagination, Archetype of Courage. Let's see down here, we have Drana and Lavinia, though that's not on the theme. I don't quite understand why they're there. I saw the stacks at the top. This is not a stacks deck, so we can't just throw stacks cards in there and hope they'll do well. Grand Arbiter, once again, not a stacks deck, though it is a very strong card. We're just kind of throwing it out there. It's not really going to do much, and it's just going to get removed. Helioid, once again, not quite sure why this is in here. Odric seems to be the payoff for all of these types of combat abilities, but just there's not enough, and I don't know why it's in here. All of those can be easily cut. Thraben Watcher just gives +1/+1 vigilance. Once again, not sure why this is in here. Easy to cut. And finally, we come to the end. Pontiff of Blight and Felidar Sovereign, even Archetype of Imagination. They're all 6 mana cards. It seems a bit much here. I do get Felidar Sovereign. It's fine. I don't love it. I really don't like this card myself, but it wins you games, so I think this is fine. And Pontiff of Blight is a lot of mana, but you get a lot of life gain triggers, and therefore I do like that. Otherwise, our proliferate creatures from Thekuthal to like Thrumming Bird and Grateful Apparition, all of these are fine. Comball is great because it gains its life. Drana is great because it gives it +1/+1 counters. Let's see. Archangel of Thune is obviously incredibly powerful in our deck. Those are fine. And finally, we come to Dovin, which I think you should just cut. It's a 6 mana draw card. I get that it gains you life as well, but it's awful. And a Johnny is fine because we are in +1/+1 counters. All right. Those are general opinions. Once again, I do feel like this deck is just kind of figuring itself out. So for me, I just picked a direction, and we're going to go into it and see what we can do. They're kind of very generic additions, but there's a lot of them, and at least I think this will give you a direction to go into. Like I said, the deck builder did send me a message on YouTube, and I did say one of the reasons that this video is kind of hard to make is that there were no comments in the request, and therefore I don't really have much to say. So what I'm going to do is pick a direction for you. I'm going to give you a bunch of cards, and if you like that direction, you can rebuild the deck in that, and we can take another look. Just make sure you let me know exactly what you want and what you don't want for the deck to be. However, if you don't like what the things I'm suggesting, just do the same thing. Go pick a direction, go in that direction, send me that direction, and we'll talk. That is my suggestion overall, but let's look at the direction I've picked, which is the +1/+1 counters. So we are going to do as much as we can, take advantage of Oloro's triggers, and we're going to do that with as many creatures as I can fit into this section. So let's get going. Amalia Benavides Aguera. I was really hoping we'd see her on another plane, but we haven't yet. Super cool character. Whenever you gain life, she explores. Now, there is an upper limit that if her power is 20, she is going to wipe the board. I don't see her power getting to 20 very easily, but she is a very strong commander and a very strong creature. So I think you're going to find a lot of value with her. I'm very close of building her into Aristocrat's Reanimator because she fits with those that kind of thing really well. She's very strong. Karlov of the Ghost Council. You can even see where I selected the whenever you gain life. Once again, just a really powerful thing. He goes up by 2 every time, so this is a creature that grows really fast and has an exile clause on him. But like even then, he will start smashing very quickly. Very easy addition. Voice of the Blessed. You're picking up on the theme here, I hope. Whenever you get a gain life, +1/+1 counter, gains abilities as you put more counters on it. Very strong card. Going on Ajani's Primate, which is like the classic version of that. Same idea. All of these creatures, and there's going to be more, have the simple benefit of getting the life triggers and getting +1/+1 counters. And I think, just to kind of explain, not just for the aggro element I chose this direction, but because the proliferation and the life gain work really well, and you get to keep those both in with this kind of strategy. So, big fan. Cleric of the Life's Bond. Now, he has an interesting ability where he will gain life himself as you play clerics. Not every one of these, there's a few clerics, but I don't think there's going to be tons. Still, you're mainly playing for that second one. Whenever you gain life for the first time each turn, put 1 +1/+1 counter. This is weaker than the rest, but it's still worth considering. It still grows your creatures. I think you still have a nice kind of benefit from it. Then here's one that doesn't trigger that way, Luminarch Aspirant. I like Luminarch Aspirant because this is a way to start putting +1/+1 counters on creatures that don't naturally have them. I'm thinking Thrumming Bird, I'm thinking Grateful Apparition, I'm thinking Kambal, I'm thinking a lot of Drana even early on. These cards are really good to kind of start some things. Esper Sentinel early on, and so this is a particularly strong card, and I think you can just play her with the opportunity cost is low. Going to 3 mana, we've got Bloodthirsty Airlist. Same thing, whenever you gain life, put a +1/+1 counter, but she comes with flying. Really big fan of that. You can get some really good attacks really early. Elenda's Hierophant is a new one. Once again, she has flying, which I really like. Whenever you gain life, you put a +1/+1 counter. And then when she dies, she's like Elenda, she splits up into tons and tons of lifelink vampires who will then give you more life gain triggers. So very strong, very good card, and I think one of the first ones I would put in here, honestly. After that, we got Celestial Unicorn. Once again, another version of this ability, just a creature that grows as you gain life. Here's one that's a little different, Vain Witch Coven, one I really like. That says whenever you gain life, you may pay black. If you do, return target creature from your graveyard to your hand. I find this creature to be incredibly strong and can trigger as many times as you can allow it as long as you have black mana. So post board clear, post bad combat, they're very good at getting you those cards back and rebuilding your board. So this is a card I do particularly really like. After which we have this card, which just got reprinted, which is really nice, Herald of Secret Streams. Very simply, all of your +1/+1 creatures cannot be blocked anymore. So no longer you got to worry about the flying archetype. You don't have to think of giving your creatures evasion. This is just permanent unblockability to all your creatures. And of course, as you might have noted, your creatures will get big really, really fast. And I will say, I didn't add in here, but you should really be playing the Soul Sisters. And I'm very, very surprised that they're not in here. Let's say creature. I believe we might get more than that. Yeah, we get another one. But actually, you could play all three of these. These are the Soul Sisters, these two especially, and Soul Mender is, I guess, just here for fun. But Soul's Attendant and Soul Warden are really, really, really strong creatures. They will just give you exceedingly high amounts of life gain triggers and work very, very well with the rest of these cards that I've been showing, allowing all of these creatures to grow incredibly fast. So these belong in here for sure. Moving on to our creatures, I saw a few ones that I thought were fun. Shabraz is really, really interesting. That says whenever you draw a card, you get a +1/+1 counter, and then you gain a life. So this is another like life gain mechanic that you can get, and with some of the card draw you have, you can really get away and start putting a lot of +1/+1 counters. I really like this. It works really well with the archive. I'm pretty happy with this card, so I think it's fun, and it grows pretty fast. After which, my goodness, we have Witch of the Moors, which is whenever at the beginning of your end step, if you gained life this turn, each opponent sacrifices a creature and you get one creature from your graveyard to your hand. This is stupid good. I think a lot of people forget how strong this is, especially in a deck that it's just so easy to trigger. That art is so awesome. Yeah, this is definitely one of your payoff spells, and you can gain so much advantage by just leaving Witch of the Moors out and just collecting turn after turn tons and tons of +1/+1 counters. Sorry, tons of advantage through your creatures, getting your creatures back and your opponent's losing creatures. And I think we're coming to the end. This is the last one. And we're going to talk a bit more about, because this has kind of been a short episode, but we'll talk a bit more on the deck before we finish up. But Nykthos Paragon, I think, is the one we're really missing here. That says whenever you gain life, you may put that many +1/+1 counters on each creature you control. Do this only once each turn. Now, Nykthos Paragon is a difficult card in a deck like this, because a deck like this wants to gain many triggers of small life, and Nykthos Paragon wants to gain one trigger of a lot of life. Now, that's not impossible, and honestly, sometimes you're just going to be happy to use Oloro's 2 life to put 2 +1/+1 counters on all your creatures. I think that'll be enough most of the time, but there'll be some situations where if you can gain 5 life, give something like with the True Conviction, you can give something lifelink and hit for like 7, and then you can use that one instead to put 7 +1/+1 counters on all your creatures. Note that Nykthos Paragon doesn't say the first, it just lets you only trigger it once, so you choose which time it triggers. Just be careful, because some of your opponents might have ways to kind of interact with it and try to take advantage of which time you're going to use it. Though when I think about that, they might just, in that case, they would have just triggered it on your upkeep, so I guess that's not something to worry about. But Nykthos Paragon should be, this card and True Conviction should be the cards that win you the game, because together they make a giant army of huge amounts of +1/+1 counters and then give them all double strike. You add in Herald, and all of a sudden you have unblockability. You're very cleanly winning the game. And that's Carrion Feeders apparently around here. Oh, did I not delete it from the previous video? Oh well, let's go back here. Going back here, it is, let's full screen. This is the direction I've suggested a bunch of cards to go in the +1/+1 direction. I've made them almost all creatures because that's what we're missing. And I've made them all very aggressive and work with our commander, because I think that's where we should be starting. At the point this deck is, like, I can look through your sideboard and like even then go through some cards and say like, yeah, absolutely play Walking Ballista, or like Myrel is really, really good here, etc, etc. But there is a limit. Right now, the deck kind of doesn't know what it wants to do, and so we need to pick a direction and go with it. Like I said before several times, the direction I picked is +1/+1 counters. If that works for you, I would test it out. I think the deck will be pretty strong. I think it'll build, it'll go out pretty aggressively, and you'll be able to get a feel for it. And if you like it, then we can start adjusting it from there. after that, we just have to decide what we want to do with it. As always, you know, we've got a lot of different cards. We've got low mana, we got mana to fix and high mana cards. I'm a big believer that we should just start off keeping it simple, you know, start a direction of the deck and go in that and see what happens. So for me right now, that's +1/+1 counters. Thank you for sending this deck. I hope this helped. I know I'm talking a lot about what I want to take out and what I want to do to the deck. Sometimes it's just part of the process. We have an idea, we've started the deck building process. There's often a lot of culling we have to do at the start, and later we can get more specific. So with that in mind, I hope this goes in a good direction for you, and I'm excited to see what happens. Good luck. Thank you so much for watching. This video is brought to you by viewers like you and people on my Patreon. If you'd like to send me another draft of this deck, or any deck, there is a link in the video description down below. And if you'd like to make your deck one of my donation decks I work on, there is a link there too. Finally, if you'd like to like, comment, subscribe, I would be very appreciative. It helps the channel quite a bit. Thank you, and good luck in brewing and building.